Cleveland! Or wherever you're watching this video from. I'm JT Curtis, and this is the history of rock and roll, the 1970s!
By dawn today, there were about 1,000 waiting for tickets to go on sale. Would you stand in line like this for any other group besides Led Zeppelin?
Probably the Stones. Pink Floyd's coming soon. I'll do it for them, too.
When it comes to classic rock, the 70s is pretty much the definitive era. This is when all the most unforgettable rockers came out, including the ones we wish we could forget. If I leave here tomorrow. But we'll get to them later. The biggest problem with the 70s is there's just so much, especially since rock was starting to split off into subgenres. So if we didn't go through your favorite 70s artist, make sure you leave a comment and let us know. And I am happy to say that we will no longer be having any more interruptions from that other guy. I calmly explained to him that this is my show and that his constant interruptions are not conducive to educating people about music, and I think he understood that. And to ensure there are no more interruptions, I hired a security guard. Okay, let's start from where we left off. In many ways, the early 70s were an extension of the 60s. Tensions between the counterculture movement and the police were at an all-time high.
The guard, under the pressure of a rock-throwing attack, panicked and fired its weapons indiscriminately.
On May 4th, 1970, during a protest at Kent State University in Ohio, police opened fire, killing 4 students and wounding several others.
Crosby came up and he had the magazine, the Kent State Killings.
The incident was covered by Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young with the Neil Young single, Ohio.
King soldiers and Nixon coming, we're finally on our own. This summer I hear the drumming, for dead in Ohio. Gotta get down to it, soldiers are cutting us down.
And it wasn't just rock artists that were covering political topics. R&B greats like Marvin Gaye made albums like What's Going On.
Talk to me, honey, so you can see what's going on. What's going on?
With Tricky Dick Nixon in the White House, the Vietnam War had escalated.
I'd like to dedicate this one to such a draggy scene that's going on.
Jimi Hendrix responded to the war on the live Band of Gypsies album with Machine Gun.
Machine gun, tearing my body all over.
This song features Hendrix's greatest guitar solo of his career, and given the guitar solos he played in his tenure, that's saying a lot. Hell, even Miles Davis considered it to be his greatest solo.
There was a rumor going around that Jimmy and Miles were going to get together, and the next thing that happened is that he died.
Tragedy struck again on September 18th, 1970, when Jimi Hendrix died of a drug overdose at the age of 27.
And I said, fly on my sweet angel.
Hendrix would become just one member of the infamous 27 Club. I mentioned before Brian Jones died at the age of 27. Well, around the same time, Janis Joplin died at the age of 27.
Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. Nothing. That's all that Bobby left me.
Then in 1971, following a long court battle, Jim Morrison passed at the age of 27.
Like a dog without a bone and actor out alone, riders on the storm.
And if you thought 27 was too young, look at Duane Allman. I mentioned him having played with Wilson Pickett, but by the turn of the decade he had formed his own band with his brother Greg. Their 1971 record Live at Fillmore East is arguably the greatest live album ever made, and one of my personal favorite albums. With Duane Allman and Dickie Betts' guitar harmonies, The album runs the gamut from blues, R&B, even jazz.
We did a lot of jamming. We'd play and we'd play and we'd play, and then we'd listen to Miles Davis, John Coltrane.
But Duane Allman continued session work and eventually worked with Eric Clapton, who formed Derek and the Dominoes. And together, they all created the masterpiece, Layla. Many times when people have asked me that stupid question, what's your favorite song, I've answered Layla. It was originally a ballad Eric Clapton wrote about his love affair with George Harrison's wife, Pattie Boyd. Awkward.
There was no way that I was going to be able to take her away from George without hurting George.
And when Duane Allman got a hold of it, he came up with the song's iconic riff.
First few chords make me melt.
Drummer Jim Gordon wrote the beautiful piano coda.
You know, we always called each other good fellas. Like you'd say to somebody, you're gonna like this guy, he's all right. He's a good fella, he's one of us.
The end of Derek and the Dominoes really represents the end of an era. Having been rejected by the love of his life, Eric Clapton and Bobby Whitlock got lost in their heroin addictions. Bassist Carl Radle would eventually die of alcohol poisoning, and Jim Gordon would be committed to an insane asylum after killing his mother. As for Duane Allman, he died in a motorcycle accident in 1971. He was 24. And if that wasn't eerie enough, the Allman Brothers bass player Barry Oakley died 1 year later in a motorcycle crash, also at the age of 24. That's just freaky. With all these artists either passing or lost in drugs, maybe rock and roll finally was coming to an end. The Who put out their finest work, Who's Next, featuring them all pissing on an obelisk, whatever. Let's hear the first track. I'm sure Pete Townshend's gonna come in with some bone-crunching guitar riff, or Keith Moon's gonna come in with some crazy drum fill, or a synthesizer. Yep, the first thing you hear on this record is a Lowry organ filtered through a sequencer, played in real time, it's not a loop. And it goes on for a while. I just have this keyboard going through an oscillator, which is basically what Townsend did, and it sounded like this.
Because this was the whole centerpiece of the Who show with the lasers, and Roger looking like some kind of furry animal.
And let's face it, it's Roger Daltrey's scream that it's remembered for.
It was a plea. Please don't make me on the stage the new boss. You're in charge.
Also, the Rolling Stones, no longer in competition with the Beatles, carried on and released some of their finest work around this time. And they got a brand new single out, Brown Sugar, which hit #1 on the charts. And it's a real rockin' song. Let's take a look at some of the lyrics. Gold Coast slave ship, bound for cotton fields. Okay, really? How do you expect to stay away from controversy when you're writing shit like Okay, maybe I'm reading too much into this. Maybe brown sugar means something else. Maybe it actually means, oh wait.
Heroin, all this stuff sort of helped.
Ugh, brown sugar. Well, I gotta move on. What?
Hi.
Hi.
I heard you were yelling about brown sugar, which is good because I am all out of brown sugar, and I was wondering if I could borrow some.
Well, brown sugar meaning heroin.
Oh, well, that'll work too.
Yeah, look, I'm actually talking about the song Brown Sugar. I'm doing the history of rock and roll. In fact, I'd probably be done by now if people didn't keep constantly interrupting me.
Oh, that's pretty cool. You know, I know a lot about rock and roll. That's off of the Stones' Sticky Fingers album. Did you talk about Andy Warhol's crotch cover?
Yeah. Listen, I've already got one guy tied up downstairs, and I don't have enough duct tape for two, so get lost before I stick my security guard on you.
Everything's upside down.
Tied up downstairs.
Brown Sugar is the lead-off track to the Stones' Sticky Fingers album, which is my personal favorite of theirs. And Andy Warhol designed the album cover. See? It's a crotch, and it's even got a little zipper right here. It totally scratched up the record, but who cares? It's the most famous album cover of all time. I have no idea why, but it is. But most fans would favor their next album, Exile on Main Street.
The Rolling Stones, Exile on Main Street. I was in the car with the Stones on the way to the session, and I guess I was talking too much, and they kind of exiled me on, I think it was Main Street. Maybe that's where they got the name of the record from.
Are you sure you didn't just hallucinate that?
Oh, yeah.
And you know, let's not forget the Kings.
Well, I'm not the world's most physical guy, but when she squeezed me tight, she nearly broke my spine, oh my lord.
And for those of you who don't know the song but recognize it somehow,
I know Darth Vader's really got you annoyed, but remember if you kill him, then you'll be unemployed, oh my Yoda.
yeah, I pretty much included the song just because I wanted to play Weird Al's version. Once again, though, the times they were a-changin', and rock and roll was craving a new direction to go into. Without the Beatles, a new band had to take up the reins. Who would that be? Alright, we got that joke out of the way. Can we move on now? So as I mentioned in the last episode, the former members of the Yardbirds created a group called Led Zeppelin. Some of you may have heard of them, and they...
Please, let me talk about Led Zeppelin. For everything that is good and holy, let me talk about Led Zeppelin.
All right, just go!
Thank you. So, simply put, Led Zeppelin is possibly the greatest band ever.
Hey, mama said the way you move, gonna make you sweat, gonna make you groove.
You got Jimmy Page, the greatest guitar player ever. Robert Plant, the greatest singer ever. John frickin' Bonham, the greatest drummer who ever walked the frickin' earth. And, whoever the fourth guy was.
John Paul Jones.
Oh, whatever. They rocked so hard. I mean, Zeppelin 1, Plant singing like, "Been days I confused the solo." Zeppelin 2, where they're like, bow, 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 bow. On Zeppelin 3, Robert Plant gets his hand slammed in the car door. He's like, ah! Tell me you have Zozo. Please tell me, for the love of the House of the Holy, please tell me you have Zozo.
It's right here.
Oh, this album is so awesome. Where Bonham's all like, boom, boom, bah! Oh, it's so good. Oh, I love it. They're a pretty great band.
I personally think they're a little hair overrated.
I'm sorry, good sir. I don't think I heard you quite right. Would you like some?
I think they're a tiny bit overrated. I like Led Zeppelin, especially their early work. Zeppelin 1 may actually be my personal favorite.
How many more times?
they definitely pioneered heavy rock, especially with Jimmy Page's production, getting a huge sound out of Bonham's drums and layering guitars.
It would be unfair to say that anybody who sings in the band thinks that Led Zeppelin was ever hard rock or heavy metal, because at least a third of our music was acoustic.
You're in the darkest side of town.
But this is where they start to lose me a bit, and the issue really hangs on Robert Plant. Not that he was a bad singer, far from it. It's more his melodies and lyrics, which are rooted more in the mystical and black magic influences. Quite a few of their lyrics borrow heavily from Lord of the Rings, which could sometimes be a little out of place given the heavy blues sound. Although imagine how much cooler those Lord of the Rings films would have been if they used some Zeppelin. But the biggest issue many people have with them is that a lot of their songs were stolen from old blues artists.
Way down inside, woman, you need love.
Okay, fine, I'll give you that, but we can at least agree that Led Zeppelin is awesome, right?
Oh, absolutely, of course. And Led Zeppelin 4 really...
I'm sorry, it's called So-So?
This is a turning point in their career and for rock and roll, featuring classics like Black Dog, Rock and Roll, and... Up, 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 up! We don't need to hear that song again.
No stairway. Denied.
Oh, come on, man! Can't we at least hear the guitar solo?
All right. Jimmy Page's guitar solo on Stairway to Heaven is considered by many to be the definitive solo of rock and roll. In fact, Stairway to Heaven itself is frequently cited as the greatest rock song ever.
Yeah, I wonder why people hate it so much, considering how awesome it is.
It's hated so much because it was played like 80 billion times. You get tired of anything that was played 80 billion times.
Even Magical Beat?
What? It was played on every rock and roll station every hour for about 25 years. First time you heard it? Wow, that's different. It's cool. It changes from acoustic to rock and roll. But the billionth time, that song is, I don't know, overplayed?
Well, regardless, Led Zeppelin is definitely a huge influence.
Such a great a breath of fresh air.
And there's no doubt that heavy metal was now a dominant subgenre in rock and roll.
Everybody was a little bit tired of peace and love, and everybody got tired of, yeah, man.
But there's more where that came from.
Oh man, I love Black Sabbath, with Ozzy Osbourne singing, you know, before he sold his soul to reality shows.
Wouldn't it be interesting to put this horror vibe to a musical thing?
I mean, there's so many classic guitar riffs off of Paranoid, but, well, the one that every guitar player learns is... I am Iron Man! And speaking of overplayed guitar riffs, you know this one?
What? I didn't sneak into your room in the middle of the night and use your laptop to put in that clip. Keep going. Oh, that one.
You know, we all came out to Montreal.
Smoke on the Water, written about a gig that literally erupted in flames, is a classic Deep Purple track.
If you want to know the story, listen to the words.
But actually everything on the album Machine Head is pretty solid. Highway Star features some great solos from keyboard player John Lord and guitarist Richie Blackmore. There's quite a lot of heavy groups to talk about during this period. I mean, well, what do you think we should talk about next?
Well, funny you should mention, I actually printed this list of the greatest rock tunes of the 70s I got from the internet.
That's good. See, now you're doing something to help me.
I always do stuff to help you, man. Now, shut up and listen. Okay, Stairway to Heaven, we already did that.
And we did that.
Okay. Oh, here we go. Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen.
Let's talk about Queen.
Okay.
Open your eyes, look up to the skies and see.
Queen was another kick-ass band, and pretty much all of them were great lead singers, with the exception of the bass player, whose name I don't remember.
John Deacon.
Whatever.
I'm in love with my car. Oh, yeah. Got a bill for my automobile. For every star in heaven, there's a sad soul here today.
But Freddie Mercury was the real star. His stage presence is legendary.
We just felt that Bohemian Rhapsody was a song that would say what we're doing at the given time. We thought of it in terms of visuals as well. People think we spent hours and hours making that film. In fact, it took literally about 4 hours, I think.
Thunderbolts and lightning, very, very frightening.
You know, we should do a Bohemian Rhapsody parody.
But dude, everybody on the internet has done a Bohemian Rhapsody parody. Let's just play the Wayne's World clip and be done with it.
Beelzebub has a devil put aside for me, for me. You can stop me and spin my eye.
You are? Why'd you do that?
So you think you can love me and leave me to die?
I should also note that Bohemian Rhapsody, which is just under 6 minutes, took 3 weeks to complete. Now using state-of-the-art 24-track analog tape at their disposal, the results speak for themselves.
We had all these incredible tools in the studio to use. We used them to make something which was parallel to an orchestral arrangement, I suppose.
And of course, Freddie plays that beautiful piano outro for the...
Hey, you sound pretty good on that, man.
Dude, how can I be playing that if I'm sitting right here?
I thought it was your telekinetic powers.
Anyway, the wind blows.
Excuse me?
Don't stop me now, I'm having such a good time. I'm having a ball. Don't stop me now if you wanna have a good time. Just give me a call.
Other classic hard rock songs include Dream On by Aerosmith.
Sing well after Saturday. Maybe tomorrow I'll take you away. Feel like making
The Boys Are Back in Town by Irish band Thin Lizzy.
The boys are back in town. Boys are back in town. The boys are back in town.
You know, this sounds like it could almost be an 80s rock song.
Yeah, it kind of does. And I especially love their twin guitar harmony. And I guess we should talk about Kiss, too.
I wanna rock and roll all day. I party every day.
Oh man, I love Kiss.
Oh, really? What's your favorite song by them?
Songs? Oh, I don't know any of their songs. I just know that one special, Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park. It was done by Hanna-Barbera.
This is going to be like A Hard Day's Night meets Star Wars.
This is ridiculous.
I'm still waiting for Kiss Save Santa. Make it happen, McFarlane.
You just practice that guitar, Santa. Next time we'll let you do a solo.
Actually, I think now's a good time to switch gears and discuss glam rock.
I think rock and roll for the longest time was boring.
Even before Kiss was wearing makeup, breathing fire, putting on these incredible stage shows, and selling toys.
This is Kiss, each sold separately.
David Bowie was bringing the theatrics and glamour into rock with Ziggy Stardust.
The idea of a prefabricated rock star, I thought was kind of cool.
Ziggy played for time, driving us up. We were voodoo. The kids were just crass. was finance with God-given ass.
Ziggy Stardust is what... Why do people keep calling me?
Oh, no, wait a minute. That's my phone.
Your phone?
Yeah, it's an Android. Hello?
Why are you guys talking about David Bowie and not inviting me on?
Oh, I'm sorry, Kira Buckland. Voice actor for various anime, cartoons, and one of the earliest internet VOs that was on Newgrounds.com. I remember you from such works as Super Smash Bros. Taunt, Super Freakin' Parody Rangers, Luciano Pavarotti meets the Wolfman.
I was never in that last one.
How do you know that?
Where do I even get started about David Bowie? He was so fantastic. He really helped popularize glam rock. The 70s were by far a lot of his best works, like Ziggy Stardust, Aladdin Sane, Diamond Dogs.
Rebel, rebel, put on your dress. Rebel, rebel, your face is a mess.
Everything with the Thin White Dew.
Babe, put some there while things are hollow.
Oh, everything was so good. Oh, and did I mention he was really hot? Like, I mean, I could stare at pictures of him all day. You don't even understand.
Yeah, I know. Okay, we gotta finish this video. Okay, we gotta go. Bye.
See why you...
How did she get your number?
Oh, she's my girlfriend.
Elton John was another pioneer behind glam rock, especially with landmark albums like Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Does your girlfriend know anything about Elton John?
If it's not David Bowie, he doesn't exist.
Gotcha. What else do we got on that list?
Wait a minute. American Pie? How's that a rock song?
I started singing, bye, bye, Miss American Pie. Drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry.
Well, it's about rock and roll, specifically the day the music died with Buddy Holly and the plane crash.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Actually, country rock was a whole subgenre all to itself.
Oh, Maggie, I couldn't have tried anymore.
Rod Stewart went solo and produced the sublime Maggie May, a nice blending of twangy acoustic guitars with heavy drums and bass, and of course Rod's unmistakable voice.
You stole my heart, but I love you anyway.
Neil Young put out a country-style record called Harvest, and it's one of his best.
Keep me searching for a heart of gold, and I'm getting old.
And even after Duane Allman's death, the Allman Brothers carried the Southern Rock badge with the country rock hit Ramblin' Man.
But I was born a rambling man.
And they weren't alone, there was also Leonard Skinner.
Sweet home Alabama, where the sky looks blue.
Oh god, this song. There's two ways to think about this song. One is that it promotes the Confederate flag, even criticizing Neil Young.
Alabama, you got the rest of the Union to help you along. Well, I hope Neil Young will remember, Southern man don't need him around anyhow.
Which is ironic because they were actually really good friends. Though it could also be interpreted as a statement on generalization, saying, hey, not all Southerners are like that. We're not judging all Northerners based on the Watergate scandal.
Now Watergate does not bother me.
Therefore, I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow.
As for me, I hate it because I've played it at every freaking cover gig and I'm tired of it. If I never have to play that song again, it'll be too soon.
Hey, it could be worse. It could be...
Oh, I can just picture everybody out there now going, Freebird!
Losers.
Freebird was actually a tribute to Duane Allman, which is cool.
Duane Allman and Barry Oakley from the Allman Brothers, they were Freebirds.
But whereas Duane Allman could play 10-minute guitar solos and keep your interest, Lynyrd Skynyrd's guitar solo gets a bit boring after a while. As much as I love long guitar solos, a lot of them just didn't seem as warranted.
How about Joe Walsh?
Good point. Joe would later join the Eagles, who, when it comes to country rock, stand out above everyone else. Their greatest hits album is one of the best-selling records of all time. Now, I'd love to play you some Eagles songs. They're a great band with some equally great guitar playing. However, the Eagles are a little tough when it comes to copyright, so here's a picture of a hotel in California. Here is a picture of a witchy woman. And here's a picture of me taking it easy.
I like the Eagles, but I know a dude who hated the fucking Eagles.
Anyway, that's what was happening on the West Coast, but what was happening on the East Coast?
I was down with broken heroes on a last chance power
Born to Run, a classic record taking influences from Roy Orbison, Phil Spector, and Stax Records.
I was sort of, just kind of telling my story, and the audience in front of me gave my own story meaning.
Come on, with slants like us, baby, we were born to run.
And it's on the epic song Jungleland where we hear one of the greatest sax solos in rock history played by Clarence Clemens. A wild tale of a tune about New Jersey.
Yeah, I mean, all he has to do is mention New Jersey and the crowd goes nuts.
Over the Jersey state line. Barefoot girls.
He just played for about 5, maybe even 6 hours. It was rather long. Playing to the point of exhaustion was important to me.
But also, another great East Coast classic, New York State of Mind.
I know what I'm needing. Don't wanna waste more time. I'm in New York State of Mind.
Ah yes, Billy Joel, who was often Springsteen's direct competitor for some reason. But Billy Joel wrote many classic tunes.
Well, only the good die young. That's what I said. Only the good die young.
And as you can see from these clips, these artists were really exciting live performers.
If you liked a band or an artist or whatever, you had to physically go to the gig.
Live albums were actually a big deal at the time. Some classic tunes from this era are best remembered in their live incarnations. Frampton Comes Alive was a monster record, and for good reason.
Biggest selling record of all time.
The 55,000 that showed up today at Anaheim were there because of only one person.
The songs on the live record are the definitive versions of many of his classics, including Do You Feel Like We Do, which featured his talk box.
Do you feel like we do?
Frampton Comes Alive changed the industry. There's a bigger audience out there than they thought, which turned it into a much bigger business almost overnight.
Oh wait, did we talk about Roundabout?
Oh, Roundabout by Yes.
Hey. What's the name of the band?
We're not doing the joke again.
Oh, come on!
I'll be the roundabout, the words make you out.
Roundabout from the album Fragile is a progressive rock masterpiece. Clocking in over 8 minutes long and featuring Rick Wakeman's virtuoso keyboard playing. He plays organ, mellotron, Moog synthesizers.
Dude. Nobody cares. I just want you to talk about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, because they used Roundabout as its closing theme for the first season.
What the hell is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? I have no fucking time for these random anime references! I'm trying to do a goddamn video on the history of rock and roll, and you're ruining it for me!
It was her idea.
I need some ELP right now.
Our machines feed the furnace. If they take us, they will burn us.
I feel better now. Emerson, Lake, and Palmer were also pioneers of progressive rock, even taking influence from classical music, especially keyboardist Keith Emerson. But if we're gonna get serious about progressive rock, it's time to talk about the progressive rock album.
Taking away the moments that make up the dull day. Fritter and waste the hours in an offhand way.
Dark Side of the Moon, arguably the greatest record ever made. It was on the charts for 13 years, the longest in history.
They're attached to this work because there's a sense of relief. You go, oh my God, somebody else feels this sense of unease.
Hanging on in quiet desperation is the English way.
There are standout tracks, the blues rock stable in 7/4, Money.
Money, it's a gas.
Great Gig in the Sky featuring Claire Torrey's incredible vocal. This is one of those albums that's just really hard to describe, especially since all the songs are interconnected. The best way to experience it is just spin it on your own, front to back, without any interruptions.
Dark Side of the Moon. What an album. I bought the album when it was new, and I put it on the turntable. I think I listened to it for like 3 days straight, and it is one of the greatest albums ever made. As a matter of fact, I carry a copy with me at all times.
You carry that with you everywhere you go?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I don't have a record player anymore. But see, see the little heartbeat there? I think that's my heartbeat. Boom, 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 boom.
Just to mention a few other progressive rock bands, there was the classic Carry On Wayward Son by Kansas.
Lay your weary head to rest. Don't you cry no more.
Wait a minute. Carry On My Wayward Son is a progressive rock song? I always thought it was a big stadium rock song. You know, like Boston's More Than a Feeling.
Well, at this time in rock and roll history, they didn't really put as much emphasis on genre or labeling things. I mean, it did exist, but the reason 70s classic rock songs are so well loved to this day is because they took chances. Can you imagine a popular band nowadays putting out an album that was just one continuous piece for 40 minutes? Inconceivable! Well, back then, you could be a hard rock band with a 40-minute song, and even have a long flute solo in the middle of it. You could be a funk band with blaring electric guitars in your song.
You could be Alice Cooper and kill a chicken on stage.
It went right into the audience, and the audience tore it to pieces. And I got a call the next day from Frank Zappa, and he says, "Did you do that?" And I said, "No." He says, "Well, don't tell anybody that." He says, "They love it."
It's just amazing that any of this great music, whether loud and rebellious, or soft and thought-provoking,
Hello, it's me.
could be considered rock and roll.
Is that why Gloria Gaynor's on this list?
Gloria Gaynor? I mean, I got nothing against Gloria Gaynor, but I think calling this song rock and roll would be a bit of a stretch.
Maybe they thought they just needed more women on this list.
There's plenty of great female rock artists from the 70s.
Yeah, why haven't you mentioned Heart yet?
Okay, how did you get past security? Listen, sweetheart, I'm the rock and roll historian here, so why don't you go, like, take selfies with cat ears or whatever?
Oh, I love doing that. Thanks for reminding me.
You're not helping.
Do you happen to have an acoustic on hand?
As a matter of fact, I do.
And do you know how to play Crazy on You?
Yeah, I do.
Well, would you mind?
Okay.
Let me go crazy on you. Crazy on you. Let me go crazy, crazy on you.
Wow, that was incredible. You've got an incredible voice. Listen, I'm gonna be editing this video a little later tonight. Would you like to stick around?
As far as I'm concerned, Heart can rock just as hard as any group in this decade.
So this ain't the end. I saw you again today. I had to turn my heart away.
I mean, Annie Wilson is not just one of the best female singers in rock history, but one of the best, period.
I bet you wanna end for speed. You have me down, 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 down on my knees. Now would ya, Barracuda?
And in fact, she can sing Zeppelin better than Robert Plant can.
Hey, them's fighting words.
Oh yeah?
I've been a long time since I did this show.
Oh.
And if that weren't enough, her sister, Nancy Wilson, is a killer guitarist.
It's true. The opening to Crazy on You is a remarkable performance, and Heart definitely deserves its place in rock and roll history.
It's just so strange to see women up there doing that. We're like, why? Who said we couldn't?
Okay, point taken.
And why haven't we discussed Stevie Nicks yet?
She was alive like a fine skyline when the sky is darling. Once in a million years, a little like a horizon.
At the time, Fleetwood Mac was struggling to recapture the same notoriety that they had with their original leader, blues master Peter Green.
I can't help about the shape I'm in. I can't sing, I ain't pretty, and my legs are thin.
When Stevie Nicks joined Fleetwood Mac, that's when the band started to produce classic albums such as Rumors, even though the band's relationships with each other were starting to end.
Kira just broke up with me.
Her unique voice, mystical style lyrics, and amazing stage persona were what made Rumors one of the best-selling albums of the whole decade.
Oh, please. Lindsey Buckingham was the real creative genius behind Fleetwood Mac, and you know it.
I can't believe she broke up with me.
Shut up!
You can go your own way. Go your own way. You can call it another lonely day. Got a lonely day.
Wait, what are we doing? Hey, who was the one who wrote Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow?
Oh, that was Christine McVie.
Oh, that was a great song.
Don't stop thinking about tomorrow.
Don't stop! It'll soon be here. Oh, okay, we really need to stop right now, because next thing we're going to end up doing Tusk, and I don't have the USC marching band to do it.
And one of the first all-girl rock bands, the Runaways, you know, with Joan Jett.
Oh man, I like to bomb their cherries.
They were 17.
I retract my statement. Oh hey, here's a band with female singers that's on this list.
Yeah, what is it?
Dancing Queen by ABBA.
Oh no, anything with them!
That's it. I'm raiding your kitchen.
How is this a rock song?
Everybody had disco fever back then. Ship-it-a-boop, ship-it-a-boop.
Oh, I heard somebody say, disco is burning, burn the mother down. Disco burn the mother down.
Okay, let's backtrack and catch up on some R&B.
Get on up, get on up, get up, get on up, stay on the scene, get on up.
Funk music really blossomed in the early 70s, redefining rhythm and blues with some unmistakable grooves. Combining these funky four-on-the-floor beats with the lavish production of Philadelphia soul.
What they do, they smile in your face. All the time they wanna take your place, but backstabbers.
The early incarnations of disco began to emerge on albums like Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life and Earth, Wind & Fire's That's the Way of the World.
Give you strength to carry on, yeah, I know. Makes your body big and strong under him and down.
These are actually some of my favorite albums of the decade.
It has a rejuvenating quality about it.
But as the pop machine got a hold of it, it got a bit watered down and overproduced, so naturally the public ate it up.
Disco was a horrible thing. We had rock and roll, we had ideals. It expressed what was going on in the world, and it was about going out to a farm someplace and listening to music. Suddenly it was all about some fancy disco that you couldn't get into, and everybody had lots of money. People started doing a lot of cocaine and sessions. They kind of came up with all this electronic crap, and you had Donna Summer.
Cocaine is a hell of a drug. Nothing get on your nerve more than some rhythmic that's the same thing over and over again. I mean, it's like making love with one stroke.
And that was the beginning of the money time. And music really was destroyed.
And therefore record companies started being run from accounting offices rather than from A&R offices.
A lot of rock artists jump on the bandwagon to move with the times. In fact, the Bee Gees had started in the 60s as a psychedelic pop band, but with the inclusion of their music in Saturday Night Fever, they became the quintessential disco band. And they weren't the only ones. The Rolling Stones had a big disco hit in 1978.
Even Pink Floyd had disco hits off of the wall.
We don't need no education.
Yeah, kind of hard to think that disco would be an influence on Pink Floyd's The Wall, another bestseller, even though it's a very dark rock opera chronicling a rock star's descent into madness.
I became rather disenchanted with it. What was gained from having a large congregation of people, which is what a stadium at its best is.
But even when adopting a disco beat, it still sounds like Pink Floyd.
All in all, you're just celebrating the wall.
Oh, and let's not forget about the Wall tour, where they built a freaking wall on stage.
Oh, no question about it. Rock theater at its finest, especially when David Gilmour stood at the top of the wall during Comfortably Numb.
I love the Wall so much. It was basically the only thing I listened to in college.
Oh, really? I listened to nothing but Dark Side of the Moon for like a year in high school. Can I steal some of they're my goldfish? Can I?
You have a good choice in snacks.
All right, enough of this disco crap. Let's get back to some old-time rock and roll.
Dude, do you mind?
Oh, I'm sorry. There we go, much better. A lot of rock and roll fans started rebelling against disco. I'm not exaggerating either. They had a disco demolition night in Chicago in 1979. Look at the footage. I'm not even reading the script. This thing actually happened.
A huge box containing thousands of disco records was blown up.
And that same year, refugees Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers put out their landmark album, Damn the Torpedoes. And Petty really did have to fight for this album to be made, suing his own record company while recording the album in secret in Los Angeles.
You know, I said, look, I'll sell fucking peanuts before I'll give in to you.
Meanwhile, on Hollywood's Sunset Strip, a different breed of rock and roll was forming, with bands like Snow and Van Halen. The first Van Halen album really foreshadows what's coming in the 80s. But it was Eddie Van Halen's face-melting guitar solos, which almost sound like something Bach would have written on an organ. You know, usually I'm the one who plays all the keyboard stuff for
Will
this
you
show.
shut up and just play your guitar?
Enough of these masturbatory guitar solos. I want to hear some raw rock and roll. Where the Ramones at?
You know, as great as it was that the music business was selling lots of records and bands were getting opportunities to produce different kinds of music, the excess of the business was starting to become a little too big for its own good.
Excuse me, I just snorted some of this cocaine here, and you know what? I specifically asked for the blue cocaine. You know, the stuff in Breaking Bad?
That isn't cocaine, that's crystal meth.
I don't care what the kids call it, alright? If I ask for blue cocaine, I want some fucking blue cocaine, okay, man?
This isn't cocaine, this is bleach.
Oh. I better check myself into a hospital. Pardon me.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug.
So the Ramones were packing CBGBs and rebelling against rock and roll's status quo. Their music was simple, raw, and exciting. No epic guitar solos, no big theater shows, no blood. At least not coming from the stage. Short 3-minute songs with power chords played very fast. Let's go! I know some people would credit bands like the New York Dolls or the Stooges as pioneering punk. Even Patti Smith, who turned a Bruce Springsteen tune into her own hit. But the Ramones were just their own thing, while still somehow retaining an element of pop.
24 hours ago, I wanna be sedated.
Most of the English bands really adapted the Ramones' distinct sound as their foundations.
God save the Queen. She ain't no human being. There is no future.
The Sex Pistols caused quite the ruckus in England, maybe even more so than the Rolling Stones had. Their lyrics were straight up anti-establishment.
It was a very, very squalid period. Class warfare rampant. I wrote my own future. I had to.
And unfortunately, the incidents surrounding them seemed to overshadow their music, especially when it comes to their bass player, Sid Vicious, who supposedly stabbed his girlfriend Nancy and soon later died of a heroin overdose.
Well, that's dark.
Yeah. Fortunately, though, their influence carried on to more commercially successful bands like The Clash.
You know, somebody had to break out and prove that this thing was a global thing.
And back in the States, the Cars took a slightly more accessible approach to the punk scene.
I guess we're just what I needed. I needed someone to be.
And with the addition of synthesizers, brought in a new wave of punk rock.
New wave was watered down.
Hey, do you like the Cars?
I love Cars. I love Detroit. That's the mecca of the car industry. That's where they mecca all the cars.
We're talking about the band, the Cars.
You're talking about the band or the Cars? Get it straight, okay?
Well, I mean, as long as we're talking about new wave, can we hear some Blondie?
But I think we save the best for last when it comes to new wave bands.
You mean?
The Police.
The Police? I'm not carrying anything, okay? I'm clean, baby. Oh, you mean the group? The Police. Roxanne!
You don't have to wear that dress tonight. Walk the streets for money. You don't care if it's wrong or if it's right. Roxanne!
Hell yeah. I friggin' love The Police, with Sting at his finest. The Police took punk rock and the new wave movement to a whole other level, especially with their influence from reggae and Bob Marley.
Get up, stand up, and did you hear? Don't give up the fight. With the pilot, make no sound. Walking on the moon.
Stuart Copeland in particular was a master at copying this style of drumming.
Reggae turns the whole rhythm upside down.
I'll send that SOS to the world. I'll send that SOS to the world. I hope that someone gets mine. I hope that someone gets mine. I hope that someone gets mine. Searching the bottle.
And of course, all these bands and styles would continue into the next decade, but we'll get to that next time.
By the way, I know I asked this during the last video, but whatever happened to the Beatles?
Yeah, didn't they have a lot of solo stuff?
Well, believe it or don't, I'd say George Harrison had the best post-Beatles album with All Things Must Pass.
Really want to see love, but it takes so long, my love. My sweet love.
A triple album with countless classic songs he had been holding on to since his days with the Beatles.
And I know how sweet life can be if I keep myself free.
But of course, you can't count out Paul McCartney, who had great success with his band Wings.
Searching everyone for the man on the run, man on the run.
Even Ringo had quite a few hit singles.
What's the pay dues if you wanna sing the blues and you know it don't come easy?
Interesting enough, it was John Lennon who probably had the least successful solo careers, at least in terms of successful singles, but his masterpiece Imagine, a song that paints a picture of a world without countries, possessions, or religion, is considered one of the greatest songs ever written.
Imagine all the people living life in peace.
In the midst of a very politically charged solo career, his son was born in 1975 and he took a long hiatus to be with his family. We'll get back to John Lennon in the next episode, but it's time for our end question.
Yeah?
Did the 70s rock hard?
What are you talking about? Of course the 70s rocked hard.
It's true, people. The 70s is the defining decade of classic rock. Everything goes back to this decade. You want to start a hard rock band? Check out some Zeppelin or Black Sabbath for inspiration. Love going to see a marathon rock concert with fireworks and lots of energy? Thank Queen or Kiss for bringing the theatrics to rock and roll. Even in my own music, I often look to the progressive bands like Pink Floyd and The Who for how to structure an album or connect ideas almost like a movie.
I love that there's this shift towards the experimental and the grand. Each decade in music has their own unique style, but the 70s in general was where the change really started to take root.
The 60s was exploration of sounds and what can you play on the radio and what can't you play on the radio, and the 70s was sort of like everybody was allowed to let loose and play with sounds and make big loud movements and motions.
The 70s, it rocked hard. I mean, there were some interruptions in there, some music that really wasn't music, but in the end, it rocked hard.
And we'll get into the 80s next time.
Yes, my day has finally come.
Hey, I gotta go, man. I'm playing tonight at Lincoln Center. I'm doing a little Rachmaninoff. So come on, come across with the coin of the realm so I have some scratch, baby.
What are you talking about?
The money you owe me for doing this job.
Oh, I'm not actually paying you.
How dare you? You'll be hearing from my lawyer. Bring out my album.
You know, I find it kind of amazing that his only job was to just keep me and her out, but he failed at both of those things.
This is very true.
Yeah.
We'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for watching this video, you motherfuckers. If you forget any 70s bands, you can go f*** yourselves. What 80s bands do you just want us to talk about, aside from me, of course? Comment below and let us know, because we want you to. Shout out!